So the big news today is President Trump calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu to back off in Lebanon, to stop striking Hezbollah, to not hit Beirut, to not deal with the Hezbollah problem. And this is very controversial. It's very controversial in Israel. And it's an important moment. And I've been warning about this moment since the very beginning of the war. We've been talking about it lately, about the divergence between U.S. and Israeli interests, and we'll get into more of that in this video. But let's start with what happened. So President Trump put out a Truth Social post yesterday that said, I had a conversation with Bibi Netanyahu today asking him not to go into a major raid of Beirut, Lebanon. He turned his troops around. Thank you, Bibi. I also had a conversation with representatives of the leaders of Hezbollah, and they agreed to stop shooting at Israel and its soldiers. Likewise, Israel agreed to stop shooting at them. Let's see how long that lasts. Hopefully it will be for eternity, President Donald J. Trump. And but there's a backstory. Axios reported that the phone call between Netanyahu and Trump was actually quite tense. But we have to put a very big caveat on this, and that is that the story was reported by Barak Ravid. Barak Ravid has a history of putting out these leaked reports that there's all sorts of tension between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, and that Trump, is fed up with Netanyahu or exasperated with Netanyahu. He's done this about 4 or 5 times in the last year, and every time afterwards, it turns out that the relationship is just fine. So we have to put a heavy grain of salt on Barak Ravid's reporting, but here's the report. Trump tells Netanyahu he kept him out of jail, should be grateful, untense call. U.S. President Trump accused Prime Minister Netanyahu of being the reason for global hatred of Israel in an angry call on Monday, Axios reported. Earlier on Monday, Iran had threatened to stop negotiating with the U.S. due to Israel's action in Lebanon, prompting the call in which Trump at one point yelled at Netanyahu, "What the F are you doing?" According to one U.S. official, Trump felt that Netanyahu was reacting disproportionately to Hezbollah's attacks on Israel. He objected to Israel destroying buildings to take out a single Hezbollah commander and Israel's threats against Beirut, Axios wrote. Another source summarized part of Trump's comments as, quote, "Everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel because of this," end quote, according to Axios. Trump also accused Netanyahu of being ungrateful, with the source saying Trump claimed the prime minister would have been in prison if not for him, which is absurd. While Netanyahu released a statement after the call that Israel's position remains the same, a U.S. official told Axios that Trump had actually steamrolled Netanyahu. Bibi said, okay, just make sure everything is taken care of, Axios quoted the official as saying. Another official said that this is one of Trump's worst calls with Netanyahu since the start of his second term. After the call, Trump announced that Netanyahu had turned his troops around and asked him not to go into a major raid of Beirut in a post on Truth Social. In another post, Trump wrote that talks were continuing at a rapid pace with Iran. And Netanyahu, so here's Netanyahu's response to all of this. Prime Minister Netanyahu put out this. Prime Minister Netanyahu, quote, "I spoke this evening with President Trump and told him that if Hezbollah does not stop firing at our cities and citizens, Israel will strike terrorist targets in Beirut. This position of ours remains unchanged. Concurrently, the IDF will continue to operate as planned in southern Lebanon." Okay. And in terms of other Israeli politicians and how it's being received here in Israel, time to say no to Trump. Israeli officials condemn Netanyahu's decision to cancel Lebanon's strike. Now, this piece in the Post starts off with a quote from Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's the most right-wing, the most extreme right-wing party leader in the Knesset, but we'll see that it's not just coming from the right. Take a look. Multiple Israeli officials took to social media to criticize Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to cancel the strike on Beirut at the urging of President Trump on Monday. Quote, "This is the time to tell our friend President Trump no," National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir wrote on X, reminding Netanyahu that he once said a strong prime minister would be able to tell the president of the United States no when necessary. Quote, "Now is the time to do what is required and necessary to strike Hezbollah," Ben-Gvir added. But it's not just coming from the right wing. Former IDF chief of staff and Yashar party leader Gadi Eisenkot also referenced Netanyahu's past remarks regarding Trump. Now, Gadi Eisenkot he wants to become prime minister in this next election. And he's generally associated with the left. He has publicly said that he always voted Labor throughout his life. Labor is the left-wing establishment party. Calling Trump's directive, quote, a humiliating demand, one that is blatantly unreasonable. Eisenkot added that Netanyahu, quote, is the man who preached morals to everyone about the basic need to be a prime minister and know how to say no to the president of the United States. Opposition leader Yair Lapid, also the left, accused Netanyahu of behaving as though Israel were a protectorate of the U.S. Lapid had called for a powerful response to the rocket fire from Lebanon on Saturday, writing that, quote, the responsibility for the security of Israeli citizens lies solely with the Israeli government. MK Oded Forer, he's also part of the opposition. He urged Netanyahu to fulfill his role and act to protect the residents of the north. The criticisms come as northern Israel continues to come under a barrage of missiles and drones, with multiple municipal leaders in the north condemning the government's handling of the situation. Former prime minister and competitor in the race for Israel's next prime minister, Naftali Bennett, wrote that the government had lost control over Israeli sovereignty and pledged to restore security to the citizens of Israel. Bennett accused the government of trying to normalize an intolerable and unacceptable situation, right? Writing that the current coalition is incapable. Okay, so he's using it to criticize the government, but you see here that the pushback on Netanyahu isn't, you should never have gone into Beirut, you should never have made the threat about Beirut, or it's not coming, it's not moving in the same direction as Trump's demand. It's moving in the opposite direction. So you see there's quite a national consensus that Israel should be escalating in Lebanon, which brings up a very important political point that I've been talking about for the last week or so, and we're going to increasingly talk about because it is becoming central. And that is the divergence between U.S. and Israeli interests that is playing out as we speak. At the very beginning of the war, I warned about this. That all this talk about how America and Israel are shoulder to shoulder and arm in arm and working together is so wonderful, but we can't be naive. The U.S. and Israel do not have the same interests. And at some point, those interests diverge. And when that happens, there will be tension. But what I've been talking about a lot just lately is specifically with regard to kinetic escalation. President Trump, for a variety of reasons, because of how he thinks about the negotiations, potentially because of the upcoming midterms, because of the unpopularity of kinetic action domestically, Trump is looking for de-escalation militarily. And for Prime Minister Netanyahu, as you just saw in this piece, his domestic political calculus with his elections coming up, as well as Israel's security situation, argue for increased escalation. And this tension is going to, or this gap between the U.S. and Israeli position regarding escalation, the political impact of kinetic escalation or de-escalation is going to widen the gap between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump as we move forward, unless President Trump reverses course on his approach to these negotiations. Okay, but that's where we are right now, and we're seeing it playing out in this exact situation, where Prime Minister Netanyahu's domestic pressure and Israel's security demands increased escalation. President Trump's understanding of the negotiations with Iran, how he wants to come to a deal, he wants de-escalation of the situation. Now, to give us a little bit more context here, I want to play you General Jack Keane's take on this. So here's a clip of General Jack Keane on Fox News from yesterday.
Intercepted 2 Iranian ballistic missiles last night. They were reportedly targeting American forces based in Kuwait. CENTCOM says the missiles were shot down immediately. No American soldiers were hurt. Retired 4-star General Jack Keane joins us now. All right, General, another attack. How should the U.S. respond?
Well, they did. I mean, it was a defensive measure for sure. And what has been happening here for several weeks is Iran's persistent and continuous violation of the ceasefire, particularly in the Straits and the Gulf area here. And what they're doing is trying to interfere with shipping for sure. They were going to fire a couple of drones to do that. We took those drones out, and then we took down the guidance system that helps to target them. and then they shot down one of our long-range drones that was up MQ-1. It was in international waters, and after that, we took a defensive measure and took down the air defense system that brought down that drone. And then we also went a little further with the command and control that supports that. So the Iranians have been violating the ceasefire that began on April the 8th quite continuously. And when it comes to what's taking place in Lebanon, it is outrageous what they're doing. That ceasefire began on April the 17th. And for our audience to understand, since April the 17th to now, the Iranians have fired 2,400 or so missiles and drones into northern Israel in that short span of time. Quite outrageous violation of the ceasefire, to be sure. That exceeds, this is Hezbollah firing into northern Israel, backed by Iran. Every single missile and rocket that they're using came from Iran. And the reality is, during the 5 weeks of the war, which began on February the 28th, the Hezbollah are firing more drones at northern Israel now than Iran fired at Israel during those 5 weeks, and they're supposedly under a ceasefire. So we actually have justification right now to go back into military operations. The president's certainly full aware of that. And what he's thinking is he's trying to get the best deal that he can from the Iranians, knowing full well that this may be some indication of how serious are they about going into a deal that would be somewhat permanent. So the reality is the president has not taken off military operations in terms of a deal falling through. And I think the Iranians, Stuart, are kind of thinking something else. They're thinking they play this out over time, 60 days, 90 days, that likely the president will not reattack, even if the Iranians don't come through and make an adequate deal. And I think they're miscalculating.
Well, look, there are reports that Iran's negotiating team is stopping message exchanges with the U.S., and they're stopping these exchanges because of Israeli attacks in Lebanon. Am I right in saying that Iran wants the attacks on Hezbollah to stop in any peace deal, and we will not agree with that? And we're not going to be able to restrain Netanyahu. He's already going to attack the suburbs of Beirut.
Well, why would we even think about restraining them? I just said what's happening. We're not initiating attacks. The Hezbollah has struck into northern Israel 2,400 times in just several weeks. That's offensive action. The people in those villages are no longer living there and in those towns. Around the Sea of Galilee, and I was there several months ago, all those villages and towns are evacuated. Northern Israel, in a sense, is evacuated. Israel can't let that stand. That's a small state to begin with. We can't let Iran impose that on us. And we're worried about Israel's retaliation. Does that at what level does that make any sense? Well, Israel has every right to retaliate here.
How come there are 2,000 missiles launched at Israel? I thought we'd been told that we'd vastly reduced the number of drones and missiles that Iran was capable of firing, but now they've got 2,000 into Israel?
This is Hezbollah coming from Lebanon, and we didn't conduct any military operations in Lebanon. And it's about over 1,000 missiles and about 1,400 or so drones to come to the number of 2,400 missile and drone attacks since April the 17th. And Israel has every right. They're abiding by the terms of the agreement, which is they must stay in a defensive mode. They have to stay stationary, and they're more vulnerable inside of Lebanon. But certainly they have every right to do anything they can against this onslaught of these missiles. And so what Netanyahu is doing, he's expanding his operation inside of southern Lebanon and attacking north of the Litani River to go after these rockets and missiles and operation centers and the command and control of all of that. He's got every right to do that. And people that are suggesting there's something wrong here, well, yeah, there certainly is. It's 2,400 attacks into northern Israel under a ceasefire.
Yep, and every right to go after that and stop it. General Jack Keane.
Right. Look, that kind of sums it up. That kind of sums up the situation in Israel, right? We're under attack every day by missiles and drones coming from the north. And how can you expect Israel to sit back and not do anything about it? But there's a bigger issue here. You know, you look at Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Israel was pushing forward. We're going to destroy Hamas. The world starts screaming, no, 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 you gotta let in humanitarian aid into the Hamas controlled areas, even though everyone knew that would embolden Hamas and enrich Hamas and give them reinforcements and allow them to survive and continue to rule there. And then the strategy, Hamas's strategy of taking hostages, ends up leading to negotiations, which ends up leaving them in power. So they're still there. Yes, they're beaten down, but Hamas is still there. The world stopped Israel. The world put barriers in front of Israel to prevent us from actually getting rid of Hamas completely. And then you have Lebanon. You have Hezbollah there. Everyone knows that Hezbollah terrorizes the Lebanese people, that Hezbollah is an Iranian actor, and that they've basically colonized, taken over the Lebanese government for decades, and that there can't be really peace on Israel's northern border and peace between Israel and Lebanon so long as Hezbollah is there. And everyone and the Lebanese government wants to get rid of Hezbollah, but they don't have the ability to. And President Trump said at the very beginning of this war on February 28th that one of the goals is to dismantle Iran's ability to have proxies. Well, the biggest proxy is Hezbollah. And yet, when Israel is trying to actually destroy Hezbollah, to actually neutralize the threat, no, everyone suddenly stops us. And then you have a similar situation developing in Iran, where airstrikes are happening. February 28th comes and Israel and America start attacking, and they're talking openly about how this is going to lead to regime change, and we're going to bring it all down, and we're going to destroy the IRGC and destroy the proxy network. And then we stop short. No. And this is the pattern over and over again. There's this lack of will to actually see things through and actually carry out a victory over evil. It keeps happening. And this is like, there's something existential, something philosophical about the moment that we're in politically. And it's playing out in all these different theaters, but the overlap between them, the commonality between them, the common denominator between them is that there's this lack of will to see things through to the end, and a misunderstanding of the Middle Eastern mind, a misunderstanding of Middle Eastern negotiating tactics. I just recorded an interview, I hope it goes up today, on Israel 365 News with Harold Rode. Harold Rode is someone who worked for 40 plus years in the Pentagon and in the Defense Department, working as a senior advisor on Iran, Iraq, Turkey, the Middle East. He even lived in Iran during the revolution. He's the expert on the way these people think. And I interviewed him, and he was talking about how the West just does not understand the way these people think. It doesn't understand their negotiating tactics. And we're seeing it all playing out. So President Trump believes that he will have more leverage over the Iranians or have a better chance of coming to a deal if Israel is not striking Hezbollah in Lebanon. And I believe that that's incorrect. He's handing a win to the Iranians. He's giving the Iranians more reason to dig in and be bold, especially because they see him doing their bidding. They see Trump doing their bidding and stopping Israel from attacking Hezbollah. I think he's actually taking away leverage from himself by reining in Israel. It would be smarter if he allowed Israel free reign and said, hey, Israel's got to defend itself. And let's remember how this all started. On October 7th, after Hamas attacked us, Israel did not attack Lebanon. The Hezbollah started firing rockets at us. And this current round of activity up there began because when the war with Iran began, Hezbollah started firing rockets at Israel. Israel never starts it with Hezbollah. But everyone knows that the only way to solve this Hezbollah-Lebanon situation, to give the Lebanese people their sovereignty, is to get rid of Hezbollah. And yet, Israel's hands continue to get tied. It's just a misunderstanding of the Middle East. And that will end off with that misunderstanding, in the words of an actual Middle Easterner. I've quoted him before, and that's a guy by the name of Ayman Dean. Ayman Dean was he was originally in Al Qaeda, and then he became a spy for MI6 in Al Qaeda. But he was an Al Qaeda member who was actually a spy for the West, and then he got out, and now he's a very well-respected Middle East expert. And look what he writes here about President Trump's Truth Social post. The mighty United States has been reduced to pleading with a narco-terrorist organization like Hezbollah for a ceasefire, all to appease a fanatical, apocalyptic, terror-sponsoring IRGC regime in pursuit of a delusional deal that was never going to materialize. There's no such thing as a deal with the Iranians, and President Trump thinks there is. There is no such thing as a deal. They've never kept any deal they've signed with anybody. And yet he's reining in Prime Minister Netanyahu. And you listen to General Keane, and he's like, this is ludicrous. Why would we rein in the Israelis? Why would we do that? Who are you trying to protect? And why does Trump think that this is going to give him a better negotiating position? And let me say it again. I'm grateful for President Trump. I'm so grateful for everything that he's done and continues to do. And let me also say, optimistically, it could be that he's playing a longer game, and that he doesn't want to give the Iranians any reason. He doesn't want to give any reason to say that our side, Israelis/Americans, scuttled the negotiations. And he knows the negotiations aren't going to go anywhere, but he wants to let it play out without any excuses. Maybe that's what he's thinking here. But either way, big takeaway here, domestically in Israel, from left to right, there is no support for halting or de-escalating attacks against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And so the Beirut was part of this tweet, that's for sure. But Israel's actions in Lebanon go far beyond Beirut, and God willing, they will continue, because again, the only way out of this. The only way out of the Lebanon mess in a long-term way is for Israel to actually deal with Hezbollah, and Israel's the only people who are going to deal with Hezbollah. Same thing with Hamas and Gaza. The only people who are going to deal with them is Israel, and so long as the world holds Israel back from destroying these evil actors, then we're back to the same problem we've had since World War II. This Western lack of will to actually defeat evil. So this is a very critical moment, I think, not only in this war, but it's an existential moment for our civilization. I hope I'm not being too hyperbolic. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing, liking, subscribing. Please share this video if you found it helpful. Please drop a comment. Let me know if you think I'm an idiot or if this was helpful. I'd love to hear what you think. God bless.